we had gone to the park, and there was a bully on the playground, and Robert was in the sandbox playing, and he was really having a good time. And he started getting tired, and he started throwing the sand with the shovel. He started kind of just throwing it over his shoulder, making it disappear. And I realized he was getting tired. It's like, okay, Robbie, time to go home. And he was like, no, he wasn't ready to go home. And I said, okay, 5 minutes. You know, that's the structure. You know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're done. It's time to go. And winding it down, it was always, Robert has always been challenged with transitions, because especially if he's enjoying the activity. But on this particular day, there was a bully on the playground who singled Robert out because Robert was not playing appropriately at that point. He was fine before. He was, you know, like I said, Robert has got a little quirky. Robert's a little eccentric, but who isn't? And he started saying some very hurtful things to Robbie. And Robbie was getting tired. He was at 3 at this point. And I wasn't going to stop the countdown because I guess I expected that the parent would step in and stop their child. Well, it so happened that the parent was a bully too. And the parent started screaming at Robbie, stop throwing that sand, and, you know, something. And I guess I was, where I was sitting, which was I was near him, but a short distance, and there's a row of parents on it, you know, so multiracial row of parents. So maybe they didn't know that I was his parent. But for a second, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, because the parent was yelling at my child, and my child, 5 years old, and they got up and stood over the sand. And at that point, I got up at the same time and stood over the sandbox, and they're, you know, pointing at Robbie and yelling at him to stop throwing, you know, expletive sand. I couldn't believe this. First of all, this is an adult cursing at a child. And for a second, you know, there was that 1 second where you're not sure what you're looking at and what you're hearing. And I immediately jumped up from the bench, and I'm like, you know, and I'm, you know, I'm coming. I'm coming. This is like, when it comes to my kid, all bets are totally off, and they're screaming, and now I'm screaming at them, who are you talking to? You know, and they're like, you know, you should tell your kid if you can't raise your kid. And they're doing the finger pointing and I completely lost it, because I just lost it. Because my son, we're now on 1, is because he was flinging sand over his shoulder, which was not hitting anyone. It was just being flipped over his shoulder. It really aggravated and irritated this parent and this parent's child, to the point that this parent made it a point to get up, you know, to hurl, you know, these horrible things at my child, at a baby, a 5-year-old. And at that point, I went nuts. It was like, what's wrong with him? And that's when it started. There's nothing wrong with him. When people ask me what's wrong with Robbie, nothing. Absolutely nothing is wrong with him. Everything is right with Robbie. I don't buy into the raising a child in the negative. I'm raising my child in the positive. This kid is so smart. When we got home that night, after he'd had his shower and you know, I calmed down, and he, you know, because I did explain to that parent in my tirade that my son is autistic. And of course they were ashamed, because he doesn't look autistic. He doesn't look autistic. So because he doesn't look like what does that look like? What does that look like? I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it's what they were basically saying is that because he does not have a certain look, they couldn't tell. And I said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have no right to do that. As an adult, you don't attack someone else's child. But the fact that this is a child who has a disability, it makes it even more profound. It makes it even worse. So after they finished doing the, I'm so sorry, and they're feeling ashamed, and the other parents on the benches, they're now, screaming, because it was offensive. When we got home later that night after Robbie had a shower and we were getting ready for bed, and I have still to this day, I have no idea why I asked him the question. I said, Robbie, do you know what autism is? And he said, yes. And I said, do you know that you're autistic? And he looked up and he said, yes. And I said, do you like being autistic? And he looked away and he looked back and he said, and that's when I knew emphatically that my son knew he was different. That's when the diagnosis became real. When I knew that he knew. Didn't matter that I knew. It's that he knew that he was different.